So go ahead, Jose.
Thank you, Edgar, for your kind introduction, and a very good morning to friends participating from Canada, and also good evening, friends from Asia. Um, Today, I would like to mainly talk to you about what goes on in the formal peace process now that Myanmar is preparing for election in November 2020. I just want to share with you the latest situation on peace process that beyond peace process beyond 2020 general election. And even though I prepare PowerPoint presentations, I would not necessarily stick to those points. Basically, I just want to talk about three parts. First is about the nature of conflict, and second part is the ongoing actual negotiation. When we talk about peace process in Myanmar, what do we exactly mean? And last is about whether or not they can achieve some important deal before election. And at the end of my presentation, as Edgar was sharing, for the last 6 years, I have a privilege of being involved in this peace process, working with the government, the military, on the other hand, 21 armed groups. Feel free to ask any question you might have, and I would share my perspective for any answer that I think I have. Uh, it's okay, good, thank you. First, I do not want to go through the history of this armed conflict, but the point that I want to make, first of all, is the Burma is a multi-ethnic country, as you all know. If I put that in perspective, Canadian perspective, I usually refer to Myanmar as a country formed by 8 Quebec provinces. I think this would give you a sense of how ethnic nationalism, a sense of distinct nationalism is strong among those 8 ethnic groups. Because of that, the first point that I just want to make it clear is the problem we have in Myanmar is not just about dictatorship versus democracy. It's more about the a tyranny of majority. Those 7 ethnic groups, minorities dominated by the dominant ethnic Burma, who controls the country, all the political power, the institutional power, through the simple democratic system. This is why, when we talk about solution, possible solution to ending over 7 decades of armed conflict in Myanmar, we have to note, first of all, that restoring a simple democracy would not solve the long-standing armed conflict and civil war in Myanmar. We need some kind of power sharing arrangement. In the modern language in Myanmar, we call basically, of course, like federalism, basically self-rule for the member states of the union and share rule for the common union, because ethnic national minorities in the past do not have regional autonomy for their respective states, and also because the parliament was structured in a way that allowed the tyranny of majority. Ethnic national minorities feel that there was an institutional suppression and also systemic alienation of ethnic national minorities issues in the union government, which is why right now, basically, there are ethnic armed groups and ethnic national minorities are calling for a federal system. That's the first point that I just want to make. This is why when we talk about peace process, unless the multi-ethnic Burma can adopt some kind of federal system that is relevant for Myanmar, restoring a democratic system would not solve the problem. That's the first point I want to make. And talking about the formal peace process, as you all are aware, there was election in 2010, and after that, the first general turned President Thein Sein, realizing that over 7 decades of armed conflict, there's knowing that there was no military solution, and he and his government invited ethnic armed organizations to have a political dialogue. When it was in August 2011, that's when the government was inviting armed groups to have a political dialogue. And ethnic armed organizations overwhelmingly responded saying that, yes, even though we took up arms to fight for regional autonomy and also ending dictatorship and all that, we are open for political dialogue. However, if we are going to have a meaningful political dialogue, we do not want to be treated, or we do not want any political dialogue under the current militarized constitution of 2008, because we are against this constitution, because we do not accept this constitution, because we don't believe that there can be a meaningful political dialogue under this 2008 constitution. If you and your government is open for political dialogue without being constrained by the 2008 constitution, then we would be entering into political dialogue. That was the response from the ethnic armed organizations, and the government agreed that yes, we would have this historic peace process outside the bounds of 2008 constitution. That's why right now, at least we have peace process in Myanmar. Now, if we look back 2011, today, we can say it's entering into 9 years. Thank you. Here, I would like to highlight the nation ceasefire agreement. Yes, once there was peace process started in 2011, as you know, there was the nation ceasefire agreement signed on October 15, 2015. This nationwide ceasefire agreement has 7 chapters. I do not expect all of you to read all the provisions in it, but what is important for us who follow Myanmar politics and who is engaged in democratic reform or peace processes, that there are some important points that I would like to emphasize that contain in the nationwide ceasefire agreement, which was signed between the government of Myanmar, that includes the military, and also right now 10 ethnic armed organizations. The first important point was that there was for the first time in the history of Myanmar, there is agreement to federalizing Myanmar. As you know, federalism used to be equated with secession in Myanmar by the military, and talking about the term federalism is also very sensitive, and people went to jail for that. But in this nationwide ceasefire agreement signed in 2015, saying that the future governing system of Myanmar shall be federal is absolutely meaningful. It's significant. Of course, we do not know what kind of federal model Myanmar would adopt at the end, which is what right now the political dialogue that is conducted between the government and the ethnic armed organizations and other stakeholders. What they are discussing in the ongoing political dialogue is Myanmar version of future Myanmar version of federal system. So nationwide ceasefire agreement committing the country to be federal is significant. That's the first thing I just want to highlight. And the second point is about the agreement to amend 2008 constitutions. I think this is very important. When we talk about ending armed conflict or ending dictatorship, whenever we talk about democratizations or lack of peace or human rights, the main problem that we talk about is the 2008 constitution at the moment. So amending 2008 constitutions is essential. Of course, when you look at the reform process, there are 2 processes of reform going on. One is democratization, simple democratization of Myanmar, conducted within the parliament since 2010. This is led by political parties contesting election who are inside the parliament. Of course, we know that this democratization through parliament inside inside parliament unless the military change their mind, would not bring about a real amendment. But this is one of the democratization reform going on. That's one process. Another process is, of course, what I'm talking about today, the peace process, ending armed conflict, federalizing Myanmar, and all that. So, but when we look at the two reform process, there's a shared objective, a shared goal, which is to amend 2008 Constitution. So, in this nation versus fire agreement, the military, the Commander-in-Chief of Armed Forces, Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, representing the Myanmar military, the government, ending armed organization, agreeing that we have this political dialogue. At the end of the political dialogue, we would adopt agreement, basically Myanmar model of federalism. This would be the basis to amend 2008 Constitution. So this is very the important agreement that I just want to highlight. As I said earlier, democratization, peace process we talk about, unless we amend 2008 Constitution, we would never achieve a real democratic system or federalism. So these 2 points I just want to highlight: federalism commitment and a commitment to amending 2008 Constitution in the peace process. And right now, I just want to give you about the what is negotiated in the political dialogue. As you know, the after 2015 general election, then the National League for Democracy Party, after winning election, they formed the government, and until 2015, the largest conference is called Union Peace Conference. But after the after NLD came into power, they also add one more phrase saying 21st century Panglong. The idea was that under her father's time, General Aung San, who was the admired general of Myanmar, who helped Myanmar, the Union of Myanmar, gain independence from Great Britain, he signed with some of the independent ethnic nationalities what we call Panglong Agreement in 1947, which gave birth to the Union. But even though the commitment was to federalize the multi-ethnic Myanmar, before he finished that job, he was assassinated. So this is why when Aung San Suu Kyi came back, basically saying we are going to finish the unfinished work of 1947 agreement, which is why they call, she and her party called the current Union Peace Conferences the 21st century Panglong. Panglong was a city, a town in Xian State, where the Panglong Agreement was signed in 1947. Right now, in the Union Peace Conference, the 21st century Panglong, basically there are 5 topics that are discussed, that stakeholders represented in the political dialogue are discussing: politics, security sector, and all these 5 issues. I don't want to go into detail about it, as you all know. Right now, the idea of this political dialogue is to adopt Myanmar federal principles. Basically, who is demanding federal system? This is ethnic national minorities. What happened here is that ethnic armed organizations who signed National Exercise Agreement, they are the key parties to the formal peace process, and they propose what kind of federal system, what kind of federal principles that they want for Myanmar. Based on that proposal, the government and the military are responding it. This is what the actual negotiation is going on inside the Union Peace Conference. If I may share with you the latest situation, what goes on is that now that we have general election coming up in 2020 in November, basically, if you look at the campaign time for political parties, they don't have much time left. So which is why the government is right now working with the 10 organizations. They would like to hold the next round of Union Peace Conference in July. So the government has a 13-page long preparation for that, and ethical organizations are also preparing for that. The question is, can they secure a deal between the government and the 10 organizations on federal principles that ethnic armed organizations are demanding right now. Unless there is a deal secure between the two parties, there's no point in convening, the 21st century Panglong with like 700 delegates. It's a waste of money. But based on the documents that I see as late as last week, there seems to be a progress on the federal principle negotiation. For example, if I may highlight some of them for you, in terms of the federal principle demand by ethnic armed organizations, one of the principles that the core demands, one of the core federalism demand for ethnic armed organizations is ability for member states of the union or the federating units to have a power to write their own constitution without contradicting the union constitution. Because this state constitution right is near and dear to them. When they talk about self-determination, without having that state constitution right, they thought that self-determination would not be meaningful. So these are one of the core demands. And right now, the government led by Aung San Suu Kyi was proposing to ethnic armed organizations as we speak that the government is already agreeing to grant that state constitution right. So when you look at the document now, the government is proposing to armed group 5 federal principles. One of them is state constitutions right. I don't want to go through all these 5 principles. So based on that 5 principles, the ethnic armed organizations for the last 4 months are also trying to secure a common position in response to the government, the 5 federal principles. Of course, when you look at ethnic armed organizations, 10 organizations, right? The KK, Korean National Union, Chin National Front, Restoration Council of Xi'an State. These armed groups also have the differences in terms of ethnicities and the size of organizations. So sometimes it takes time for them to negotiate among themselves. But luckily, based on the document that I was seeing last week, the 10 organizations also adopt the common positions in response to the 5 federal principles that the government is offering right now on the table. So in terms of timeline right now, the government and the armed groups using this month of June to finish negotiating these federal principles and peace process design beyond 2020 and all that. If they could agree, they would like to convene the peace conference in July. Of course, the number of participants, delegates, used to be like 700, but they would reduce because of COVID-19 and all that to only like 230 or something. So at least what I want to update you is there's a progress in terms of preparation, in terms of substantive negotiation. Of course, until they sign actual deal, we cannot say 100% that this is going to happen. But looking at the two negotiating teams from both sides, the government and armed groups, what they are negotiating, I see that there's a real progress going on. Let's hope the best. If they could do this Union Peace Conference in July, in terms of timing, the government would be obsessed with election because the election commission already agreed that the election would take place in November. So August, September, October, 3 months would be a time for political parties for campaigning. So these are basically the update that I want to share with you on the formal peace process and the federal principle that they are negotiating. And another question related to this is what is going to happen to peace process after 2020 election? So this has been an important question among ethnic organizations in particular, which is why for the last 1 year, they want to ensure that right after election in 2020, any political party that is winning election, who forms the government, they would like to see that they pick up the peace process right away and continue the peace process. Basically, they would like to see the peace process being continued until they finally adopt the federal principles, uh, which would be which would become the peace accord. What they call the peace accord, they call as the Union Accord. They would sign Union Accord, then that would be the basis to amend 2008 Constitution. So ethnic armed organizations have proposed to the government to put in place a guarantee that peace process is continued beyond 2020. This is also a part of the negotiation at the moment alongside federal principles. And so in July, if they are going to sign an agreement on federal principles, this would also include a guarantee for peace process beyond 2020. This is also the preparation as we speak and the current negotiation. Thank you. I think instead of me spending a long time on this, maybe I just want to say briefly about the political parties in 2020 election. Yes, I have to admit myself that as much as I'm involved with the peace process and know the detail of what goes on inside the peace process, I'm not in depth, like a full-time involved in political parties and election process. But I just want to give my perspective. I think in 2020 general election, I can say what I want to share is that NLD Party, National League for Democracy, I'm sure nationally speaking, across Myanmar, NLD Party would be winning election, especially if you look at the constituencies where the dominant Burma people live. NLD basically is going to compete with the USDP and others. You can tell for sure NLD is going to be winning in those constituencies dominated by the where ethnic Burman, dominant Burman people live. However, the question is 7 ethnic states where the Chin states, Kachin states, and all these Shan states. I think we all would assume that those ethnic states, the fact that there has been a merger among ethnic political parties, which was not the case in, especially in Chin State, for example, in 2015, there has been a merger among 3 parties. You can tell in 2020 that those ethnic votes would not be split, just like they split in 2015. So, which would mean, I think, the ethnic states, many ethnic parties would be also winning election. You can tell, like Shan State, Shan National League for Democracy is very popular. Like in Kachin State, there is also merger, Moon State, others. So I think here in 2020 election, I do not think that NLD would be winning as big as they did well in 2015. So that's one thing I just want to share my view. If NLD is not winning enough votes to form a government on their own, then the question is, would there be a coalition government, or what would happen? I think this is something we are going to wait and see, and this would be an interesting topic to explore further as well. Yes. Okay, I think. This is like a Center for Development and Ethnic Studies. Basically, if you look at the slides here, in terms of advocating for the federalization of Myanmar and also heavily involved in peace process, I think CDES has been heavily involved in supporting the formal peace process. I think many of you might know Dr. Lian Sakong, who is one of the chief negotiators from Ethnic Organization. Basically, CDS is led by him, and he's one of the main drafter of Nation Ceasefire Agreement, and also the future Union Accord. He's heavily involved. Through him, CDS has been supporting the formal process, and also, on the other hand, knowing that unless the people know about what goes on in peace process, how would they support the reform process? Which is why CDS has been publishing many publication in Burmese to sort of like raise awareness about the issues that has been negotiated, and also not just publication. There's also a peace forum where the leaders from the government and ethnic organization are invited to be speaking, and also the participants from the grassroots level join together, then they can engage. So these are some of the activities that CDS has been involved. Thank you so much. Let me end there, and I would be more than happy to share further if you have any other questions. And thank you so much, everyone, for your kind attention.